It started as a simple act of kindness, one that should have ended with a smile and a thank you. When 13-year-old Jaden found a wallet on the sidewalk, he didn't hesitate. He knew the right thing to do. He looked inside, found an ID, and walked straight to the address listed, hoping to return it to its owner. The woman, surprised and grateful, thanked him and took back her wallet. That should have been the end of it. But just hours later, Jaden's heart pounded as flashing blue and red lights filled his front yard. Police officers stood at his door. Confused and scared, he glanced at his mom, who had no idea what was happening. What had he done wrong? Was returning a lost wallet a crime? The questions swirled in his head as the officers knocked. What came next would change everything. Jaden's mom, Maria, opened the door, trying to keep her composure. The officers, two men in uniform, looked serious but not unfriendly. They asked if Jaden had found a wallet earlier that day. Maria, still confused, nodded, and Jaden stepped forward, his heart racing. He tried to explain, nervously stumbling over his words. He had just returned a lost wallet to a woman he didn't know. That was all. Simple, right? The officers exchanged glances before one of them asked to see the wallet. Jaden's stomach dropped. He never thought to keep it. He handed over the woman's contact information and the details he remembered. But instead of being reassured, the officers seemed even more tense. Maria's face turned pale as they looked at each other in silence. What was going on? Why were the police here, and what could possibly be connected to a simple act of kindness? The officers asked Jaden to sit down, their tone shifting from curiosity to something more serious. Maria felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Why were they treating her son like this? She glanced at Jaden, who was trying his best to stay calm, but looked completely lost. "We're going to need to speak with the woman you gave the wallet to," one officer said. Maria nodded, though she had no idea what was going on. As they waited for the woman's response, Maria began to worry. What if the woman had seen something in the wallet she shouldn't have? What if it was linked to something illegal? The questions gnawed at her, and she could see the same fear reflected in Jaden's eyes. A knock at the door interrupted their thoughts. Another officer arrived, holding a piece of paper. The silence in the room grew heavy as the officers exchanged quick glances, and Jaden's nerves intensified. What was written on that paper? Was the situation worse than they thought? The tension was unbearable, and Maria's mind raced. Then, just as quickly as the police had arrived, they left, promising to follow up. But something was different. It wasn't over. As the officers left, Maria felt the weight of the air around them grow even heavier. Jaden couldn't stop shaking. "Mom, what do you think's going on?" His voice was quiet, barely above a whisper. Maria had no answers. The entire situation felt wrong, like they had just stepped into something much bigger than they could understand. That night, sleep eluded both of them. Every time Maria tried to close her eyes, she saw the officers' faces, their expressions unreadable. She kept thinking about the paper the second officer had brought. What was on it? Why had it been so important? She had a sinking feeling that they weren't just investigating a lost wallet anymore. The next morning, Jaden's phone buzzed, pulling him out of his restless sleep. It was a text from the woman he had returned the wallet to. Her message was short, but it sent a chill down his spine. *You shouldn't have gotten involved. They're watching. Jaden's blood ran cold. What did she mean? Who was watching? And why had she said that? Fear crept up his spine as he glanced at Maria. Whatever had started as a simple act of kindness had now spiraled into something far more dangerous, and the truth felt further out of reach than ever. Jaden couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. He showed the text to Maria, who immediately tensed up. They both stared at it, trying to make sense of the cryptic message. "Who's watching us?" Jaden asked, his voice barely a whisper. But Maria had no answers, just a growing sense of dread. The day dragged on, each hour heavier than the last. Maria tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched too, And then it happened. As they stepped outside to grab some fresh air, a black car rolled slowly down their street, its tinted windows hiding the driver. The car slowed to a stop just in front of their house before driving off. Maria's heart skipped a beat. She tried to brush it off, but she couldn't ignore the sense of being followed. Later that evening, as they sat down for dinner, Jayden's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a text from the woman, it was a phone call. The number was unlisted, but he answered anyway, his voice shaking. A deep voice on the other end spoke urgently. "You don't know who you're dealing with. You've stepped into something dangerous. Get out before it's too late." Before Jayden could respond, the line went dead. His heart raced, and his mind was spinning. The pieces weren't fitting together. What had started with a simple good deed was now spiraling into something far darker, and the people involved weren't backing off. The walls were closing in, and neither Jayden nor Maria knew who to trust anymore. The stakes were rising, and the true danger was beginning to reveal itself. The phone call sent a wave of panic through Jayden, but he knew one thing: he couldn't run anymore. He had to know the truth. After hours of thinking it over, Jayden made a decision. He called the woman, his hands trembling. She answered after a few rings, and her voice was different, strained, almost fearful. "You shouldn't have called me," she whispered. "They're listening." "I don't understand," Jayden said, his voice breaking. "Who's after me? What's going on?" There was a long pause, and then she spoke, her words rushed. "I didn't lose my wallet. I planted it there. They're part of something much bigger, and now you're involved." Jayden's mind was spinning. "Who's they? What is this?" The woman hesitated. "I work for a group, people with power, and they want that wallet back. It's not just money, Jayden. It's something valuable, something dangerous." Before she could say more, the line went dead. Panic hit Jayden harder than ever. He looked at Maria, who was pale, not knowing how much he had learned. They had to get out, they had to leave. But as he turned to grab his bag, there was a loud knock at the door. They both froze. Jayden peeked through the window, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Several men in black suits, standing at the doorstep. He could see their badges, but their faces were hidden beneath dark sunglasses. The woman's warning echoed in his mind. As Maria opened the door, the men stepped inside without a word, scanning the room like they had all the time in the world. One of them looked straight at Jayden and said, "You've been a problem, kid, but this ends now." Jayden's heart thudded in his chest as they took him by the arm, dragging him out the door. But just as they were about to shove him into a car, something unexpected happened. A black car pulled up, screeching to a halt. Maria's breath caught as the woman Jayden had helped earlier jumped out, her face frantic. "No, don't touch him," she screamed. She pulled out a gun, aiming it at the men, who froze in place. "This is bigger than you think," she said, her voice sharp. "And you'll regret it if you hurt him." Jayden was in shock. What was happening? Who were these people? The men hesitated, then backed off, eyes narrowing. "This isn't over," one of them muttered before they retreated into their car, leaving Jayden, Maria, and the woman standing in the middle of the street. The woman turned to them, her expression softening. "You have no idea how close you came to being caught in something much worse. But now you're in this, whether you like it or not." Before Jayden could say a word, the woman turned and walked into the darkness, leaving him with more questions than answers. The door to the unknown had been opened, and now there was no turning back. The next few days felt like a blur for Jayden and Maria. They couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that their lives had been irrevocably changed. The woman's warning echoed in their minds, and though they didn't hear from her again, they knew they'd barely scratched the surface of a much larger world, a world of power, secrets, and danger. Jayden stayed home from school for a while, too nervous to leave the house. But as the days passed, the fear slowly started to fade. They never saw the men in black suits again, and no one came knocking at their door. It felt like the storm had passed, but Jayden couldn't help but wonder if it would return. He would never forget the woman's words, "You're in this now." Whatever that meant, he knew one thing: his life would never be the same. The questions would remain, but for now, he and Maria were safe. But for how long? Only time would tell.